Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time. Today, we're undertaking a major deep dive into a text that has really fundamentally altered how a lot of people view ambition, strategy, and just the raw mechanics of social and political life.
That's right. We're talking about Robert Greene and Joost Elfer's The 48 Laws of Power.
And our mission here isn't to judge the book's morality at all. We want to perform a systems-level analysis.
Yeah, we want to answer three core questions. First, what is power, at least as it's defined by these, historical patterns?
Second, how does it actually operate within social, political, and institutional hierarchies, regardless of our ideals?
And, maybe most critically, what are the specific behaviors that the system consistently rewards and incentivizes? Behaviors that are often, completely separate from individual ethics.
This book, which has become this kind of notorious blueprint, it really functions as a synthesis of centuries of strategic human behavior.
It does.
So for you, the listener, we are analyzing the playbook to understand the game. This is not a self-help manual, and it's definitely not an endorsement of ruthless behavior.
Exactly. We're looking at this text more like an anthropological study of power dynamics.
Right.
Because, as the source material itself argues, these dynamics are fundamentally inescapable. They operate whether you choose to participate overtly or if you try to opt out entirely.
So you can't just ignore the game.
You can't. Understanding the rules of the court, so to speak, is step one. It's about self-protection, and for us, a deeper systems comprehension. It gives us the vocabulary to recognize manipulative incentives when we see them in the wild.
Okay, let's unpack the origins then. Before we jump into the laws themselves, we need to understand the intent behind it all. Where did this seemingly universal wisdom come from? Who is Robert Greene, and what brought him to this profoundly cynical subject?
Well, Robert Greene's background is, it's rooted in classical studies. He has a degree in it, in fact, which is just crucial for understanding the historical depth of the book.
Okay, so he's not coming at this from, like, a business school perspective.
Not at all. Before this was published, he worked in a bunch of different fields. He was an editor at magazines like Esquire. He was a playwright for a while. And his co-producer on the project, Joost Elfers, he's known for his work on several visually compelling bestsellers.
But the genesis of the book, it wasn't an academic project, though, was it? It sounds much more observational.
It was. The core idea was really born out of these discussions in Venice, in Italy. Greene was involved with an experimental art school there called Fabrica.
Fabrica, right.
And just by observing the political dynamics there, the inherent social competition, what he called the scheming world, he and Elfers realized the incredible timelessness of Machiavelli.
So they saw that these power games weren't just confined to, say, Renaissance Italy.
Exactly. They recognized them as perpetually recurring human patterns. The book was published around 1998-2000, and it just exploded into the popular consciousness pretty soon after that.
What makes these 48 laws so striking is the sheer diversity of the sources they use. I mean, we're not just talking about Roman emperors.
No, it's this kind of accumulated strategic wisdom spanning over 3,000 years. It's a massive intellectual project.
So where are they pulling from?
The laws are a really rigorous distillation of observations from the lives and writings of an incredibly diverse cast of historical figures. You've got foundational military strategists like Sun Tzu, author of The Art of War.
Of course.
And Karl von Clausewitz, known for On War. Then you have these powerful statesmen who shaped entire continents, people like Otto von Bismarck and the legendary French diplomat Charles Maurice de Talleyrand.
But the authors didn't just look at the people at the very top of the hierarchy, right? They also mined the intricate high-pressure lessons from people operating deep within those complex social systems.
The courtiers. That's where the real flavor of the book comes from. You see the clear influence of figures like Baldassare Castiglione, who wrote the Book of the Courtier, and the Spanish Jesuit Baltasar Gracian. His maxims are foundational to a lot of the laws about appearance and self-control.
And it gets even more diverse than that. For lessons in pure, successful manipulation, I mean, untainted by the obligations of statecraft.
They include figures like the great seducers, Ninon de Lenclos and Casanova, and they put them right alongside actual criminal con artists like Yellow Kid Weil.
That mix strategists, statesmen, courtiers, seducers, and con artists, that sends a very clear message, which is the book's central, profoundly cynical premise. Let's just state it plainly. What is the core systemic belief about power here?
The central premise is that power is an amoral, inescapable, and inherently duplicitous game.
Amoral, not immoral.
Amoral. The pursuit of power is driven by this deep human need. The source material says, the feeling of having no power over people and events is generally unbearable to us. When we feel helpless, we feel miserable.
So everyone is consciously or unconsciously looking for more control.
Pretty much. And the paradox lies in how this amoral game operates in our modern, supposedly civilized world.
Right, because we live in a world that demands we appear civilized, decent, democratic, and fair.
Exactly. And this is where the book introduces its crucial warning. Playing by those civilized rules too strictly, taking them at face value, that ensures failure. It ensures ruin at the hands of those who are not so foolish.
So the modern power player is always operating under this systemic tension between appearance and reality.
Always. Which is why the solution advocated by the book, derived from strategies of figures like Napoleon and the ideal courtier, is to master the art of indirection.
The ultimate subtlety.
The iron hand inside a velvet glove. If you're direct, if you use overt force, you just inspire resentment and resistance. You expose your real intentions, giving your enemy a clear target.
But if you master indirection,
Then you can manipulate people so subtly that they don't even realize they're being guided. They might attribute the outcome to chance, or maybe their own choices, and so they don't resent you. They don't resist you. That's the genius of the courtly system the book analyzes.
this is critical for our systems analysis then. What happens if you try to just opt out of the power game entirely, if you think you can just rise above its cynical nature?
The book is merciless on this point. It argues that attempting to opt out only makes you powerless and miserable.
So the game doesn't stop just because you decided you're not playing.
Not at all. The subtle players who remain on the board will inevitably leverage your moral appearances against you.
In other words, your own moral rectitude becomes a weapon they can use to manipulate you.
Absolutely. The people who profess moral superiority are often described as being among the most adept at indirect manipulation. They use strategies that hide their power moves behind a veneer of virtue, like displaying weakness to gain sympathy. That's Law 22, the surrender tactic.
So you have to be in the game, if only to recognize its dynamics and defend yourself.
You have to. As Machiavelli wrote centuries ago, and Greene echoes this quote, "Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good." It's a stark assertion that the system fundamentally punishes the naive.
Let's transition now to the foundational strategies the book provides. To even begin playing this amoral game, the first requirement is mastering yourself. The single greatest barrier to power, the book suggests, is your own emotional response.
This ability to cultivate emotional distance is described as the foundational element. It's a skill that requires, conscious, lifelong effort.
And why is that?
Because emotions, whether it's love, fear, excitement, they immediately cloud reason. They impede clear strategic calculation. If you are operating from a reactive position, you cannot possibly control the situation or plan the exhaustive steps needed for success.
And among all the emotional responses, anger is singled out as the most destructive one a strategic actor can display.
Anger is a triple threat. First, it impairs your judgment, which is obvious.
Yeah.
But more dangerously, displaying anger instantly reduces your control over a situation because you reveal exactly what provokes you.
You give away the playbook to your own emotions.
You do. And third, paradoxically, it heightens your enemy's resolve. They're actually encouraged by your visible loss of control. The historical prescription for dealing with someone who has hurt you is much better served by feigning friendliness or indifference. You keep them off guard. Open fury is a strategic blunder.
Emotional feeling is inevitable, but strategic action has to be detached.
That's the core of it.
To maintain this detachment, this planning ability, the perspective required is described using the image of Janus, the double-faced Roman god who looks forward and backward.
It's a vision that requires constant cognitive activity. Looking to the future means adopting the motto, "No days unalert." This involves exhaustive planning.
So not just dreaming of a happy ending.
No, not at all. It's about calculating every possible permutation, every pitfall, every strategic countermove, many steps ahead. The powerful person has essentially already lived through multiple future scenarios in their mind. The further you can see, the more prepared you are, the more powerful you become.
And the second phase, looking to the past, that's purely for objective self-education. You analyze mistakes not in terms of grudges or personal failings, but strictly through the lens of the 48 laws.
You examine the past mistakes that have most grievously held you back, and you extract a purely objective lesson, a cold oath to never repeat that specific trap again. This practice of constant, detached self-evaluation is the key to breaking unproductive emotional patterns.
You have to treat your own past failures like a strategic case study, not a source of regret.
Precisely.
So once that foundation of emotional distance is established, you immediately have to deal with the vertical power structure. Let's start with the highly counterintuitive Law 1. Never outshine the master. This is fundamentally about managing the master's insecurity, not showing off your own brilliance.
Masters, particularly those who rose through intense competition, are inherently insecure. They desire to feel superior to those around them in every aspect, intelligence, wit, and charm.
Right.
So the book calls displaying your gifts directly a deadly but common misperception. By shining too brightly, you inadvertently inspire fear and insecurity in the person above you. And that leads almost invariably to resentment, being sidelined, or even replaced.
The classic anecdote illustrating this is Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister to Louis XIV. He committed the ultimate strategic blunder by hosting a party for the king.
Fouquet had just completed his masterpiece, the Château Vaux-le-Vicomte, and to honor Louis XIV, he threw this spectacular, unprecedentedly lavish party. I mean, new dishes, incredible gardens designed by Lenotre, a play by Molière written specifically for the occasion.
And his intention was to show his loyalty, right? Its indispensability and financial skill, hoping to become prime minister.
That was the goal. But the optics were just deadly. The king, known as the Sun King, who believed himself to be the source of all glory, saw a servant who had utterly outshone him in taste, in wealth, in popularity, and in his own court.
The entire court was talking about Fouquet's brilliance, not the king's.
His vanity was mortally offended. Within 3 weeks, Louis XIV had Fouquet arrested by D'Artagnan.
Yes, that D'Artagnan.
And had him imprisoned in the most isolated fortress for the next 20 years. Fouquet was replaced by the notoriously bland and parsimonious Jean-Baptiste Colbert, a man famous for doing his job efficiently, but who would never dare to appear smarter or more lavish than the king.
So the system rewards those who minimize their visible threat.
Absolutely. The strategic solution, then, isn't to be incompetent. It's to execute a strategic maneuver that transfers your brilliance directly onto the master's reputation.
And that's the genius of Galileo's observation of Jupiter's moons.
Galileo was desperately seeking financial security for his research. He recognized that his powerful patrons, the Medicis, didn't really care about the intricacies of orbital mechanics. They cared about their name, their dynasty, their glory.
Right.
So when he discovered the 4 major moons orbiting Jupiter in 1610, he framed this scientific breakthrough as a political and dynastic event.
Instead of just claiming scientific credit for himself, he packaged the discovery as a cosmic alignment with the Medici symbol.
Jupiter was the mightiest of the Roman gods, the symbol of the dynasty. So Galileo announced that the 4 moons, which he called the bright stars, perfectly harmonized with the number of the Medici suns in orbited Jupiter, just as the suns revolved around the dynasty's founder.
He literally aligned the Medici family with the heavens.
He did. He made his patrons shine brilliantly among the courts of Italy. And this resulted in Galileo gaining a full salary and becoming the official court philosopher. He didn't challenge the master's authority. He became the strategic instrument of the master's glory.
This principle of necessity and utility, it links directly to what the book calls the ultimate power goal, Law 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you.
This is one of the most chilling laws. If you are no longer necessary, if your unique skill can be easily replaced, or if your service is no longer urgent, you will be done away with.
The ultimate power is creating a relationship of absolute non-transferable dependence.
Because the system will discard you the minute your utility runs out. The book recounts this story of a Sienese mercenary.
The one who saved the city from a terrible siege.
Right.
But once the danger passed, the citizens decided to kill him.
Exactly. They reasoned that, yes, he had saved the city, but now he was burdensome, expensive, and a potential future tyrant. So they decided to kill him and then worship him as our patron saint.
Wow.
The act of killing him removed the burden of his continued necessity and expense, and worshiping him allowed them to retain the memory of his benefit without the cost of his presence.
Necessity, according to the book, rules the world. If you become dispensable, you become a liability.
It's a cold calculation.
Okay, moving from that vertical hierarchy to strategic interaction. Deception is not just a tactic. It's presented as the most potent weapon and a highly developed art of civilization. The system reliably rewards our deeply ingrained human instinct to trust what we see.
And that brings us to Law 3. Conceal your intentions. If people have even the slightest, vaguest suspicion about what you're really up to, all is lost. They'll focus their energy on blocking you.
So the key is not to just close up, which raises immediate suspicion, but to distract.
Right. The book outlines two primary methods for this. The first is the decoy.
The decoy.
Yes, the decoy involves openly talking endlessly about your supposed desires and goals, but never your real ones. You can appear friendly and open, but you're actually sending your rivals on these time-consuming wild goose chases.
That gives you the advantage of time and secrecy, allowing your true plan to ripen beneath the surface of all this distracting, sincere-seeming chatter.
Precisely. The second, more passive method is the smokescreen. This relies on being utterly bland and unreadable.
The ultimate poker face.
The ultimate poker face. The source material references figures like Franklin D. Roosevelt and Henry Kissinger who mastered this. They would often bore or lull opponents with a monotonous voice, slow speech, and blank expressions.
The mind struggles to stay focused on an uninteresting object.
Exactly. And when the opponent's guard was completely down-tired, bored, or just convinced nothing of importance was happening, the strike would come with bold, definitive terms. The simple truth is that people easily mistake transparency and sincerity for honesty. They want to believe in the honesty of those around them.
And if that works, the next logical step is to conceal the labor involved in your success. That's Law 30. Make your accomplishments seem effortless.
This connects to the concept of sprezzatura, a term from Castiglione's The Book of the Courtier. It literally means a studied carelessness. It's the active, conscious effort to hide all the sweat, the struggle, the labor that went into your achievement.
Why is this appearance of ease so vital to power?
Because power depends so vitally on the illusions you create. When you reveal the mechanism of your cleverness, the years of practice, the hard work, the complex calculations, you instantly become just one more mortal among others.
What's understandable isn't awe-inspiring.
It's not. If people see the effort, they tell themselves, oh, I could do that too if I had the money or the time or the connections. By concealing the sweat, you maintain the mystique of a godlike skill. You ensure the audience remains in awe, and that preserves the power gap.
Let's talk about the book's surprising and deeply cynical perspective on alliances and loyalty. Law 2 is startling. Never put too much trust in friends. Use enemies.
The book's reasoning is rooted in the volatility of emotional debt. Friendships often fail in power dynamics because kindness unbalances everything. When you grant a friend a favor or a position, receiving that favor can become profoundly oppressive.
They feel chosen due to friendship, not merit, and the need to constantly repay that debt secretly bothers them.
Right, leads to ingratitude, resentment, and eventually a desire to sever the connection entirely. The story of the Byzantine Emperor Michael III and his friend Basilius is the ultimate warning against this.
Michael raised his best friend, Basilius, from a stable boy to his chief counselor. He loaded him with gifts, titles, political favors.
He ignored all the warnings, trusting Basilius because he felt Basilius owed him everything. But the more Michael gave, the more burdened Basilius became by Michael's charity.
He realized the only way to become truly independent was to sever the source of the debt.
And he did. He orchestrated the murder of Michael's uncle, Bardas. Then a few years later, when Michael ran into financial trouble and asked Basilius to repay a large loan, Basilius refused. He had more money and power than the emperor, and ultimately he orchestrated Michael's murder.
The friend you trust knows exactly where to strike because they know your weaknesses intimately.
Whereas former enemies, conversely, have a strategic advantage. They operate based on stable, mutual self-interest, not volatile personal feelings.
That stability is key.
It is. Former enemies, once won over, have more to prove, and they operate based purely on cold calculation. Talleyrand, needing a partner to conspire against Napoleon, chose Joseph Fouché, his most hated enemy.
Because he knew their relationship would be based on mutual self-interest, the need to survive Napoleon uncontaminated by personal affection.
And that ensured greater reliability than any emotional alliance. The system rewards calculation over sentiment.
This principle of necessary transactional relationships is the backbone of Law 13. Appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude.
When asking for help, you should completely ignore appeals to morality, mercy, or gratitude. The book calls that a threadbare cord that snaps easily under pressure.
Self-interest, on the other hand, is woven of many fibers. It's the only reliable lever that will move people.
You have to train yourself to think your way inside the other person's mind, to see their needs, their ambitions, their fears. And you emphasize how your request meets those needs, even if that emphasis is totally out of proportion to the reality of the situation.
It's about making them feel that assisting you is their best, most logical, and most beneficial choice.
Obviously.
Finally, let's look at the tactics of fluidity and uncertainty, starting with Law 17. Cultivate an air of unpredictability.
Predictability is a colossal strategic weakness. You're basically giving control freely to your opponents. Humans are creatures of habit. We crave familiarity and consistency.
So deliberately inconsistent behavior, which seems to have no pattern or purpose, it puts opponents on the defensive.
It does. They waste massive amounts of mental energy trying to explain your moves, and they burn themselves out in the process. The historical example here is the legendary chess champion Bobby Fischer.
Right. He kept the World Championship of Chess match in this suspended state of terror, not just with his skill, but with his deliberate antics.
Fischer would debate the prize money, the logistics, the lighting, the seating. He'd threaten not to show up at all. His constant, seemingly purposeless chaos unsettled his rival, Boris Spassky, because it just seemed irrational.
The opponent is forced into a state of cognitive overload, trying desperately to find the pattern in the madness.
As Stonewall Jackson advised in warfare, always mystify, mislead, and surprise the enemy if possible. Such tactics will win every time because they paralyze the opponent's ability to plan.
And the ultimate expression of this fluidity is Law 48. Assume formlessness. This is the paradox of strategy, the need to discard the very rules you've just learned.
Rigidity makes you an easy target. If you adhere too closely to a fixed plan or a set identity, everyone knows your next move, and a single blow can shatter you. Power must be fluid and adaptable, like water or mercury, constantly changing form to remain ungraspable.
The powerful person has to accept that nothing is certain and no law is fixed.
Exactly. This applies to personal and organizational identity. The powerful must avoid having their identities set and their habits congeal. That elicits boredom and makes them easy targets for anyone who can predict their behavior.
So the final step of mastery requires you to be ready to throw out the laws that others preach and the books they write, including this one.
Right. To gauge each new situation on its own terms. Relying too much on fixed rules means you end up taking a form that's not of your own making, which limits your ability to adapt. The goal is to be utterly ungraspable and elusive in the eye of the enemy.
Now we shift our analysis from specific laws to how these rules establish and maintain systemic operation. This is where we look at the roles, incentives, and feedback loops that govern hierarchical systems. Let's map the actors necessary for power maintenance, starting with the necessary evil, the cat's paw or the scapegoat.
This role is systemic because every powerful entity requires ugly tasks to be done. Backroom deals, necessary betrayals, aggressive suppression of rivals, all to maintain its position.
But powerful leaders have to avoid appearing as the agent of this ugliness to preserve their spotless reputation. This is Law 26. Keep your hands clean.
The system mandates that the true leader appear virtuous. This requires outsourcing the immorality, placing the necessary foul play onto a designated subordinate.
This is where the cat's paw comes in.
Precisely. The system creates the institutional role of the cat's paw, often a trusted outsider or a dupe or the scapegoat. They execute the dirty work, absorbing all the potential political blame. And when the inevitably messy operation goes wrong, they take the fall.
The leader sacrifices the subordinate to the court or the public, preserving their own moral authority.
And the source material provides the excellent example of Franklin D. Roosevelt. He maintained a reputation for honesty and fairness despite facing countless situations that required severe political manipulation.
So who was his cat's paw?
For 20 years, Roosevelt's secretary Louis Howe played the role of the ultimate cat's paw. Howe handled the manipulation of the press, the underhanded campaign maneuvers, the ruthless bureaucratic infighting. He absorbed all the political blame, allowing Roosevelt to stand above the fray, acting as the principled statesman.
The feedback loop there is clear. The system rewards leaders who meticulously keep their hands clean. The cat's paw is incentivized by being close to power, but ultimately punished for being visible.
It's a dangerous role to play.
Next, let's look at the systemic incentives for reputation management, specifically through the power of contempt. This comes from Law 36. Disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge.
Your reputation is presented as the cornerstone of power. The systemic incentive here is the efficient use of energy. Engaging with a petty problem or a minor enemy just validates them. It gives them existence and credibility.
The best revenge and the most powerful signal is total disdain.
Exactly. When Henry VIII wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon and the Pope opposed it, Henry didn't engage in theological debate. He played a devastating power game of pure contempt.
Right, he just ignored the Pope's authority, created the Church of England, and carried on with his divorce as if the Pope were irrelevant.
He essentially canceled the opponent out of the political and legal system. This strategy works because turning your back on what you disdain infuriates the opponent, but since you have no dealings with them, they have no formal avenue for retaliation.
So the system rewards powerful actors who act like a king, turning their back on what they disregard, thereby conserving energy and enhancing their superiority. Disregard is often the highest form of power signaling.
It really is.
We discussed Law 30, effortlessness, earlier, but let's analyze it as a systemic narrative. The core systemic lie is that effort equals reward. How does the perception of effortlessness reinforce hierarchy?
The system mandates this narrative of ease to maintain the power gap. If the masses believe that the powerful achieve their status through sheer, grueling, visible effort, then the masses are tempted to believe they could replicate that success, given the time or resources.
It makes power seem attainable.
Right. But by prioritizing the perception of effortlessness, the sprezzatura, the power actor, preserves mystique. They ensure the audience remains in awe, convinced they are dealing with godlike skill, not reproducible hard work. This mystique is essential for stability. It discourages the average person from challenging the elite.
Which explains why indirect action is always systemically rewarded over direct coercion.
Coercion, the application of direct force, it just creates a negative reaction, visible resentment. It requires constant, costly policing. The system rewards seduction, which is Law 43.
Operating on individual psychologies and weaknesses to make others willingly move in your direction.
Seduction is superior because it's more efficient. It creates enthusiastic pawns. And crucially, it avoids that negative feedback loop of resentment. T.E. Lawrence, during the Arab Revolt, understood this perfectly.
He said they were dealing not with rigid formations but with individuals, and that their kingdoms lay in each man's mind. You have to win the psychological battle before the physical one.
Seduction works because overt power plays are counterproductive in modern systems where people are naturally suspicious of authority. To overcome that coldness and mistrust, you have to find the psychological key that unlocks the stranger's heart and mind, appealing to their specific desires, anxieties, or fantasies.
And the most refined form of this indirect imposition of will is controlling the options. That's Law 31. Control the options. Get others to play with the cards you deal.
The best manipulation always seems to offer a choice. The system rewards this because by forcing a choice between, say, the lesser of two evils, the victim feels a sense of agency and control. But they're actually a puppet.
Whenever people feel they have a choice, they walk into your trap that much more easily. They might be resentful of the circumstance, but they're less resentful of you.
Exactly. This is best illustrated by the story of Ivan the Terrible. When he was fed up with the Moscow noble factions, he dramatically withdrew from the capital to his rural village.
Knowing full well the citizens of Moscow were terrified of the chaos that would ensue without him.
So they begged him to return. But he refused, unless they granted him absolute, unlimited power, the power to train and execute traitors without any interference.
And because the desperate citizens granted him this power themselves?
The source material notes that they resented him less for the terror he unleashed, because, after all, they had granted him his power themselves. It is always strategically wiser to allow your victims the illusion of choice.
Let's pull these ancient court strategies and systemic incentives into the modern institutional environment. Starting with the perils of professional isolation. Law 18. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous.
In any modern, highly competitive organization, the danger of isolation is profound. When people feel threatened, the immediate instinct is to retreat to a mental or physical fortress.
Like an office that's too hard to get to, or just relying on a small, tight circle for all your information.
Exactly. And this leads to a dangerous loss of perspective, reliance on secondhand information, and increased paranoia. Isolation, historically and strategically, often precedes defeat.
So power, according to this playbook, requires the opposite. It requires constant circulation and social contact.
Absolutely. Power depends on information flow and social interaction. You have to force yourself into more and more different social circles, placing yourself at the center of things.
The Roman statesman Cicero succeeded brilliantly because he mingled everywhere. He knew everyone, he had this vast network of connections, so any threat in one sphere was easily counterbalanced by an ally somewhere else.
Retreating to a fortress, just makes you a predictable target. The powerful must be permeable, always in circulation, because no hunter can fix his aim on such a swift-moving creature.
Moving to career trajectory and leadership transitions, we encounter Law 41. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. This applies directly to corporate succession and professional inheritance.
Modern professional environments often encourage this uncreative, cookie-cutter approach. We're taught to look at successful predecessors and imitate their methods, believing that doing A, B, and C will guarantee success.
But the system punishes this stubborn stupidity because circumstances never repeat themselves exactly. You risk being permanently perceived as an inferior imitator, always standing in the shadow of the giant.
That's the strategic imperative. Power requires establishing one's own name and identity by changing course, refusing to operate under the shadow of the past. The book notes that General Douglas MacArthur, when he took command in the Philippines during WWII, refused to simply copy his predecessor's static strategy. He realized that relying on past actions was foolish in a new, fluid situation.
You have to strategically differentiate, sometimes even if it means appearing to slay the overbearing father or disparage his legacy, just to shine in your own unique way.
It's a bold move, but sometimes a necessary one.
Let's consider political and social hierarchies and the deep human aversion to radical disruption. Law 45. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once.
This is a critical insight into human psychology. Although change is often desired in the abstract, people complain about their current condition deep, rapid change is extremely dangerous for a leader. It upsets core human habits and routines.
People cling desperately to the past structure, even if it was flawed, and that can lead directly to revolt.
Right, so the wise leader must retain the visual continuity of the past, even while changing the underlying mechanisms. Machiavelli observed this need for strategic conservatism. The leader has to retain the semblance of the old forms, the old titles, the old ceremonies, the old administrative structures.
So it seems to the people that there has been no dramatic, disorienting change.
Exactly, because the great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances, as though they were realities. You change the substance, but you keep the aesthetic familiar.
This relates to Law 38, thinking versus behaving. The essential tension between inner, radical thought and outward, strategic conformity.
To rise successfully, one must avoid flaunting your unconventional ideas or looking down on the masses, because people will find a way to punish you for making them feel inferior or uncomfortable.
So you should think whatever revolutionary ideas you like privately, but outwardly, conform rigidly to conventional behavior.
You wear a mask.
Yeah.
Little dance of orthodoxy. This helps you avoid the punishment of ostracism or being perceived as just seeking attention. You reserve your true, strategic energy for action.
Finally, let's look at media, branding, and the management of public perception in a social age. Law 46. Never appear too perfect. The envy dynamic.
Appearing too perfect is one of the most dangerous strategic positions you can take. Perfection creates silent enemies because envy is a universal human response to superiority.
And these silent enemies, they disguise their feelings. They might complain about trivial things, but they'll never confess to feeling inferior. They actively seek grounds to criticize the superior person.
So the modern necessity then is strategic imperfection or vulnerability. It's smart to occasionally display minor defects or admit to harmless vices.
It's a necessary strategic move that gives those who envy you something harmless to feed on, deflecting attention from your more important sins or achievements.
Cosimo de' Medici, for instance, understood this. He made sure he displayed his most lavish wealth only on the inside of his house, keeping a modest public facade to avoid arousing envy in the Florentine streets. The system incentivizes this strategic vulnerability to make you seem more human and approachable.
This contrasts with Law 32, playing to people's fantasies. This is the heart of mass influence, whether it's used in modern advertising or political demagoguery.
People lead desperate lives full of boredom, routine, and fear. They want desperately to believe in something that offers sudden, powerful relief. Therefore, the powerful must be a source of pleasure by playing to these fantasies.
So never promise gradual improvement through hard work. Rather, promise the moon, the great and sudden transformation, the pot of gold.
Exactly. Fantasies gain power because they play on banal truths that weigh heavily on us all. The crushing routine, the lack of meaning, the economic oppression. The ability to spin a fantasy out of an oppressive reality gives you untold power.
The demagogue taps into societal fragmentation by promising a mystical union of souls, or the advertiser promises adventure versus the crushing boredom of routine.
The powerful understand that people operate more on what they want to believe than on cold, oppressive reality.
Our analysis brings us full circle to the core distinction this material forces us to make: the difference between understanding the system and exercising individual ethics. The laws operate irrespective of the user's personal morality or intent.
The book is fundamentally Machiavellian in its assertion. The system rewards effectiveness, adaptability, and survival. We have to constantly remind ourselves of that quote from Machiavelli. Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to come to ruin among the great number who are not good.
The focus is removed from judging intentions and placed squarely on understanding the underlying mechanism.
Right. The awareness of how not to be good is presented as a crucial survival skill. It's not about embracing cynicism, it's about recognizing that power is often hidden inside seemingly moral or neutral social norms.
This is where strategies like displaying weakness to gain sympathy law 22 are so insightful.
Absolutely. The appearance of powerlessness is often the most subtle and effective mask. Making a show of one's weakness is described as a very effective strategy, subtle and deceptive, because it disarms an opponent's natural suspicion.
Honesty is used not as a virtue, but as a calculated power strategy.
It's intended to convince people of one's noble character, only to lower their guard. The book exposes how conventional moral virtues are co-opted and used as subtle and deceptive power plays.
The final major theme here is how incentives shape human behavior far more profoundly than stated intent. We think we operate based on our values, but the system rewards calculation.
Since all human interaction is presented as involving some degree of deception or strategic positioning, the critical skill for the powerful is amoral calculation. You have to train your eye to follow the effective actions, the outward consequences, and never get caught up in gauging someone's intentions through moral judgment.
People will tell you their intentions are pure, but their actions will reveal the incentives they follow.
It's a constant cost-benefit analysis applied to every single social interaction, including personal relationships. The system incentivizes judging everything by what it costs you in energy, time, and mental peace.
There's that quote from Nietzsche that encapsulates this mindset. The value of a thing sometimes lies not in what one attains with it, but in what one pays for it, what it costs us.
And that incentivizes strategic withdrawal, detachment, and calculated indifference over emotional obligation. The incentive is always to prioritize the effect on one's own power base and survival, minimizing costs.
To summarize what this deep dive into, the 48 Laws of Power illuminates. Power is an amoral, social, and constant calculation. The system fundamentally rewards indirection, strategic detachment, and emotional mastery.
The book compels us to see the modern world, despite all its democratic and civilized trappings, as still functioning much like a highly sophisticated scheming court.
Understanding these cynical rules is vital, and as we emphasize, it's not necessarily to become ruthless ourselves, but to acquire the necessary vocabulary and framework to protect ourselves from being manipulated.
The book argues that by mastering these laws, you spare others the pain that comes from bungling with power by playing with fire without knowing its properties. In this framework, naivete is a weakness that leads to misery. Awareness is the necessary shield against strategic harm.
The ultimate reflective paradox, however, it lies in the final strategy, Law 48. Assume formlessness. While Robert Greene spent hundreds of pages establishing 48 definitive rules, true mastery requires the ability to discard all fixed forms and rules, even the 48 laws themselves, to adapt to new, changing circumstances.
It creates this self-nullifying conclusion that forces the reader into endless adaptation. You must learn the rules perfectly, internalize the principles, but then be ready to ignore them entirely when the situation demands it.
Napoleon's advice captures this perfectly. The laws that govern circumstances are abolished by new circumstances.
Too much respect for other people's wisdom, or even the book's own detailed laws, will make you appreciate your own ability to calculate and adapt to the immediate situation.
That raises a final provocative question for you to consider, drawing on the paradox of that final law. If the ultimate act of power is the ability to adapt and change form, what questions does this book leave you with about the true cost of maintaining genuine independence and the limits of strategic predictability in a world that is always changing? This deep dive was based on the landmark work, The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, a Joost Elfers production. We encourage you to read the book yourself, support the author if you found the ideas valuable, or check your local library for free access. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.